You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
The most expensive race in Illinois history is almost over. People go to the polls on Tuesday and will decide whether or not to keep the governor we've got or replace him with someone else. Joining me now with insight and analysis on the state of the race in Illinois, Democrat Christian Mitchell and Republican Tim Butler. Good to have you both from the House of Representatives.
Nice to be here.
Thanks, Mark. Representative Butler, first to you. Are Illinois voters better off today than they were 4 years ago?
Well, I certainly think they're better off today than they were under Pat Quinn. I think we saw under Governor Quinn's leadership that the state did not move forward. But I'll acknowledge we've had some tough times over the last couple of years, and that's because, Governor Rauner has come in and really tried to change things in the state of Illinois, and he's run up against Mike Madigan and his whole crew here in the Statehouse. And so it's been a difficult couple of years for Governor Rauner to try to make some of the changes that he's had. But I think he has a vision for moving the state forward that I agree with, to be economically competitive again and to move forward where we're a better state than we were under Governor Quinn. And I think he would, if he gets elected to a second term, I think he'd do a great job, and we'll see the state move forward, and I look forward to having him serve in a second term.
The governor has said that he's learned in office and he's got some experience in government. 4 years ago, he was this experiment. He didn't have any experience in government. He was a rich guy who spent a lot of money and bought a lot of political ads. Today, J.B. Pritzker has no government experience, and he can afford to buy even more ads than Governor Rauner. How is he more qualified today than Bruce Rauner was in 2014?
So two things. One, to Representative Butler's point, I think running is interesting. I would say here's what Bruce Rauner has run up against. He's run up $1 billion in unpaid interest on our bills. He ran up $16 billion in unpaid debt. He ran 72,000 college kids out of the state. So his record is failure, and I actually don't think he's learned much during that time. What I would say is that J.B. Pritzker's run a very different campaign. When you look at the contrast that you're seeing JB talk about a positive vision on how to make sure we keep and expand access to health care, invest in education, invest in infrastructure all across the state. He's been everywhere across the state. And I think that what you're going to see from J.B. Pritzker is someone who is collaborative, someone who listens, and someone who will be willing to learn from mistakes rather than compound them. And I think that's a very different style of leadership compared to Bruce Rauner.
The governor did have a formidable foe in Speaker Madigan, though. I think you would agree with that.
I don't know if I'd use the word foe. I would just, I hesitate only because of the climate that we're in. I think that we should remember that our political opponents are not our enemies. That's my only hesitation.
Point taken. Yeah. But politically speaking, in opposition, Speaker Madigan is rather clouded in this building. Do you think that if J.B. Pritzker wins and becomes governor, who has more power in that scenario, the governor or the speaker?
I frankly don't know if it's the right question. I think that ultimately, it's not so much about power so much as it is how do values align and how are people able to work with and negotiate with each other. Do I think that J.B. Pritzker and the Speaker will disagree? I'm sure they will. I think all politicians do. And I think the question is going to be, for voters, does J.B. hew to the values that he's carved out during this campaign? Does he stick to his campaign priorities? And assuming he does, and assuming he and the Speaker disagree, I imagine that'll be conducted through the legislative process.
The governor says he paints a very dark picture if J.B. Pritzker wins. Turn the lights out, he says. Businesses, employers will run for the hills, mainly because of this progressive income tax, a plan that J.B. Pritzker supports and wants to have passed. Do you agree with that? A progressive income tax will send employers running for the hills?
One thing I would say to the point about Speaker Madigan, all we have to do is look at the recent history of the two Democrat governors that we've had recently, Governor Blagojevich and Governor Quinn, who have, we've seen that Speaker Madigan has been the person in charge under both of those two governors. That will not change under Governor Pritzker. I think what we're going to see if J.B. Pritzker gets elected is a turn for the worse in the state of Illinois, for the economy in the state of Illinois. I'm worried about a graduated income tax, but with that, I'm also worried about a lot more of the other progressive policies that might come out. We don't know very much about what J.B. Pritzker is going to want to do, and I think it's going to be a tough time for Illinois. If that's
Can I push back on this vision a little bit, though, for a couple of reasons? One is there is no way that J.B. Pritzker could do worse than Bruce Rauner, who called Pat Quinn, his predecessor, who was by no accounts a particularly great governor, a miserable failure on jobs, despite the fact that jobs under Bruce Rauner actually grew at a slower rate than they did under Pat Quinn, number one. Number two, my conservative friends like to talk about tax policies if it's somehow the only thing that job creators decide upon when they're going to invest in the state of Illinois. And it's just not true. We still have a higher median income. We have a great college and university system despite Bruce Rauner's attempt to destroy it and the consequences. We've still got great hospitals, and we're the shipping and logistics hub of the world. Now, if we are asking those who have done well to pay just a little bit more to make sure that we can invest in our roads and our bridges and our schools, but we're going to guarantee them a more stable and effective government, not the 736-day budget impasse that Bruce Rauner imposed, I think a lot of job creators are going to be able to get behind that sort of vision if we're giving them those guarantees, and I believe that JB will, and we will as a General Assembly.
To say anybody's better than Rauner is an effective rhetorical device to eject him from office, but once he's gone in that scenario, then those policies have to stand under the withering criticism of people and stand for themselves, because the other guy, the boogeyman's gone, right? So now you've got to sell that idea. Do you think, J.B. Pritzker tells us he can pass a minimum wage increase in year number 1. He also says he can get a progressive income tax by year 3 if there's a constitutional amendment there. What impact do you think that would have on the economy? Do you think the Illinois voters are going to buy that?
So I think both of those impacts would be positive. First of all, we know that when working people have more money in their pockets, they're going to go out and spend it at the local pharmacist, the local grocer, and it's going to invigorate the economy and create more jobs. We are, despite what my conservative friends would say, we are an economy that is driven by consumer demand, and when consumers have more money, they spend it, number 1. Number 2, if we are, instead of with the current system we have, where right now people like Bruce Rauner and J.B. Pritzker pay half as much as a share of their income compared to the middle class, if we actually have a tax system that's fair for working people, where they have more money in their pockets, where there is stability in our budget, where we've got the revenue to invest in infrastructure and education, I think Illinois will be much better off than it is today.
Right now, Erica Harold, the Republican running for Attorney General, is running ads painting the scenario where Governor Pritzker is in charge and Governor Rauner loses. That's an interesting thing for her to campaign on, that scenario that, hey, the governor might lose. His favorability numbers are down. His poll numbers show a big gap. Are Republicans excited to vote for this governor?
Well, I think what Erica has shown on her campaign is that she's going to be an independent voice in the Attorney General's office. I mean, that's what her campaign has been about, and that's what the commercial is about. I think I've talked to people who are excited about voting for Governor Rauner. I'm going to vote for Governor Rauner, but obviously we've been through some challenging times. But I think when you look to the future, when you look to see what Illinois could become if a Democrat gets elected governor, then I think it's a very stark vision than what we've had, and I am worried about the future of the state if that's the case. So I've made the case that for Republicans to move forward, and if we're gonna continue the work, we need to reelect the governor. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. Whether or not you're 100% liking the guy right now, the important thing is you got to vote for him to make sure we move forward positively.
A lot of conservative voters are looking at candidates like Libertarian Cash Jackson, or Conservative Party candidate, former Republican Senator Sam McCann. What would you tell voters like that who are considering that third-party vote? Well,
I think it's a completely wasted vote for the third-party votes. We know they're not going to win. We know all they're doing is try to take votes away from Governor Rauner. That's why Senator McCann is in the race in the first place, to take votes away from Governor Rauner through money that's been funded to him to try to take votes away not only from Governor Rauner but from Republican candidates for the House as well that he sent out mailings for. So I would certainly encourage people to vote. To not vote for the third-party candidates.
And this is the Republican Party message in 2018. Don't vote your hopes, vote your fears, right? And that to me is kind of the challenge in this race. I mean, look, Erica Harold is running a campaign trying to point a finger at, say, a potential Governor J.B. Pritzker, because she can't stand on her own record. She doesn't want people to know that she won't defend the right of people to be covered for pre-existing conditions in their health care. She doesn't want people to know that she won't stand up for a woman's right to choose, so she's trying to deflect. And that's the same thing that Bruce Rauner's doing. He's running around the state trying to make this race about a boogeyman, because he knows if he goes to voters and says, I held with the budget for 736 days, I wasted $1 billion in interest payments, I sent 72,000 college kids out of the state, undermining our future, nobody's going to vote for him. But the problem for Bruce Rauner is everyone knows his record. And I think when you look at somebody like J.B. Pritzker and somebody like Kwame Raoul, who are running on positive records of accomplishment and a vision of change, that's a really good contrast.
To say that the Democrats have run positive campaign is ridiculous. All I've heard out of the Democrat mouths for the last 6 months is failure, 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 failure. That's all they're trying to run on to put it on us. When we know that a big part of the equation is the governor has not been able to carry out any part of his agenda because of Speaker Madigan. Speaker Madigan's held it all up. That's the problem. And the failure that they talk about has come about because of their own speaker, Speaker Madigan.
Now, my understanding is that we broke the budget impasse with a bipartisan compromise that the governor was not a part of. Maybe there was a different budget impasse that got broken that I missed, but I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. We went around the governor.
I think that at some point in all of this, everybody has said we were all to blame, both sides, and there has been a lot of, we're seeing play out right here, a lot of roadblock and people stymied with their agendas, or there's been a lot of, that's politics, that happens. But I want to ask you both, before we let you go, closing arguments, why would you tell people to go to the ballot on something other than the governor's race? We've talked about that at issue right now at length. Let's talk about something else. Why would you want voters to show up and vote for something at the ballot box this year other than the governor's race?
Yeah, so let me talk about two things. So one is the fact that you can early vote, the fact that you can vote by mail, the fact that we've seen 200,000 more people early vote based on what Democratic campaigns have done to target those voters is because we have some of the best and strongest voting laws and protections in the country. The reason why we have those is because we have a state house and a state senate that has been Democratic, that has upheld those values, that worked, by the way, with some good Republicans to make sure that the Voting Rights Act was strengthened in the Illinois Constitution. Sending those majorities back to the House and Senate matters. But I would also say this. In a time when we can't rely on the federal government to truly protect us, whether it's our environment or to help us negotiate with our police or to make sure that a woman's right to choose or health care protected, the Attorney General's office is more important than ever. You need to go and vote for Kwame Raoul because he's going to protect those rights that we care about, and Erica Harold would allow them to be destroyed. Those are two very important examples beyond the governor's race, which is a clear choice for J.B. Pritzker, of why people should go to the ballot and vote for Democrats.
And Representative Butler, the final word.
I think you have races and issues up and down the ballot that are going to drive people to the polls, whether it's a local issue like we have here in Sangamon County when it comes to a 1% tax increase for schools. But I think the thing that people should focus on are two things. One, the State House. If Democrats pick up seats, which I hope they don't, but if they pick up seats in the House and get to 71 again, they're going to have the supermajority. They can put through that constitutional amendment on a graduated income tax with 71 votes when they have the supermajority. And you have 4 targeted congressional races here in Illinois, that the balance of who becomes the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives could be in the balance from who we elect here in the state of Illinois. And I would encourage folks to vote for Republicans because we've seen what Nancy Pelosi does when she's Speaker of the House, and we do not want to experience that again.
All right, Representative Butler and Mitchell, I have to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining us and advocating forcefully for your parties. We're back in just a moment.